I am privileged to be joined today by Congressman Eric Burlison and Tim Burchett. These two distinguished gentlemen have been at the center of the effort to force the Pentagon to disclose the truth about the UFO phenomenon, including the government's own potential involvement in the recovery and reverse engineering of alien technology. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I know your time is short, so I want to dive straight into the fray with a series of questions, and these questions are addressed to both of you. To begin with, I'm sure my audience would like to know what this battle for disclosure has been like behind the scenes. Have you experienced resistance, obstruction, obfuscation, threats, etc., from the Pentagon, the intelligence community, or perhaps even your colleagues on Capitol Hill?
Go ahead, Eric. I can. Yeah, 100% from day one. We've, they've given us the Heisman, the hand in our face kind of thing. Eric wasn't there, but Luna was there. Representative Luna and Matt Gaetz went down, I believe it was Eglin Air Force Base. We were told we were going to get to talk to some pilots down there. And we went down and were briefed, and some stuff was pretty secret, scary stuff they told us, but absolutely nothing to do with the UFO issue. And then, we said we wanted to see these pilots, and they said, well, you don't have the clearance to do that. This is the head of the base down there. And Matt, and then they sent us up to a room that was actually bugged. Luna undid the microphone that was under the desk, which was kind of crazy. But they did have us a nice fruit plate, so it kind of evened out. So we waited there about an hour, and Matt called the people that he needed to. And then, oddly enough, these pilots came in their flight suits. We went down, and they briefed us on what they saw, and it was pretty spectacular. And it's just been that way ever since. We're told we're going to get to talk to somebody, and then we don't, and then we bring in one department head who's, some little smart aleck with a man bun, tells us that this stuff doesn't exist. And then you don't have a man bun, do you, dude?
I don't have a man bun.
Okay, well, yeah. or a bad attitude, but or a fat government job. Tell us they don't exist, and then we ask them about specific instances, and they say, we don't have the data on that. And then they just kind of give us a little smirk. And, the guy still hadn't gotten over being shoved in a locker in junior high school. And he's just exhibiting his strength. And so I've come to the conclusion we can have all the hearings we want to have and all the discussions and subpoena this person, bring this person in the skiff. But until we have a president with some guts, that's just going to give us total disclosure. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I first want to just say, extend compliments where they're due to Tim Burchett for leading the charge on this. He was leading the charge when it wasn't considered popular or it was very risky. And so thank you to Tim for kind of being a spearhead for this. And I've come in, this is my second year being in office. And it's extremely frustrating to me. What I think is the one thing that we have been able to confirm that without a shadow of a doubt is that there is a deep state. There are these special access programs, and they're violating the law. We hear that consistently from people that are the whistleblowers. We hear it consistently from the Department of Inspector General for the Department of Defense and from Intel. And so that to me, that gives us a responsibility to go forth and to determine what exactly is this money being used for? What are these programs doing? And make sure that they are following the law and that they're reporting to Congress. There is no doubt in my mind that is the case. And I don't think there's anybody that's come forward to, whether in a skiff or outside of a skiff, that's given us information otherwise. So we know that that's true. Here's the problem. Then you've got people within the government, within Arrow, for example, who say they've done the research, as Tim was mentioning, that they've looked into these things and they couldn't find anything. Well, what's clear is that we know there's secret programs. We know that they're obfuscating and hiding information from Congress. And yet these individuals, I think that there's this arrogance within the system that people have, where they don't want to come up and look like they have their pants down, or that the emperor has no clothes. And I think that is what's driving a lot of the mentality of people that are working within the Pentagon and the intelligence community, is that they think, if I don't know about it, it must not exist. And so we're facing that as well.
Have either of you guys received any kinds of threats, or have you been told in no uncertain terms to stop looking into this matter?
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to comment.
I get more threats from labor unions than I do. I would say one of the threats is that, is from the muckety mucks in Washington, D.C., that being involved in this delegitimizes your credibility.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the greater threat.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say, too, you got, the political realm. It was used against me this last campaign, but we ended up winning with a larger amount than I've ever won. And I read a book one time, and they said when they do stuff like that, it's always somebody that but you wouldn't expect. And that's that. And I'll just leave it at that. You'll read about it in the Tim Burchett story. Matthew McConaughey is in negotiations to play me in the movie.
Really?
No. Come on, dude.
Well, we'll see if we can make that happen.
Reno, you're going to find that Tim, if you haven't already figured it out, Tim is full of jokes.
I think it's safe to say that so far the most explosive testimony we've heard in the 2 congressional UAP hearings are the extraordinary allegations made by former intelligence official David Grush, namely that there exists a legacy crash retrieval program which has not only recovered alien craft, but also non-human biologics. Are you both convinced at this point that the crash retrieval program exists and that alien bodies have indeed been recovered?
Go ahead, Tim.
I think it's a big cover up. I've heard from more than one source that there's recovery, and you got to ask yourself, what are they recovering? And if something's flying, is it a drone or is there a biological being in it? So I fall on the side of, I do believe that there's something like that going on. I haven't, I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, I know Grush pretty well. He was threatened, and he was outed for having PTSD, which outside of Washington, D.C., where Eric's from and where I'm from, we respect our warriors, so to speak. And so there's a lot more to that. But yeah, I've talked to too many people that have been involved. But it's got to be so compartmentalized. I think I always give this story. Oak Ridge National Laboratory is just in my backyard. I don't represent that area. Chuck Fleischman does, but about 6,000 people that work over there live in the district I represent. And during the Second World War, they developed the atomic bomb in Oak Ridge. And there were people there that had ability. They were in certain programs, and it was so compartmentalized that nobody knew exactly what they were looking at. The case I always give is I knocked on a guy's door and he was putting his American flag up. We were talking. He was about the same age as my dad who fought in the Pacific. And I talked to him about his service. And he said, no, I worked at Oak Ridge. And he said, funny thing is, my wife and I worked on the fuse and she worked on something else, some electronic component. And he said, but neither one of us knew what the other one worked on. And that's how compartmentalized Oak Ridge was. And there was over 12,000 people there. and maybe a half a dozen knew what was going on in all that. So I think that's what you're seeing with this. I think you've got a very compartmentalized science community. I believe they've handed this off to government contractors that are outside of the realm of government, where we can't FOIA them, we can't get a freedom of information on them, and then we are not we're not allowed access to that, and nobody knows exactly who's got what and everything else. So it's a kind of a complex situation. I think it's done that way by design, and the people that knew could connect all the dots, most of them are dead.
Yeah, I would say I think there is a crash retrieval program. In fact, I think that there was a program that was called Spacecraft Retrieval Program. What they'll say is that was designed to make sure that whenever our own satellites, or if an adversary's satellites or other spacecraft were to crash, that we can mobilize and quickly recoup the material. Similar to the Chinese spy balloon. When that material came down, we had clearly an organized effort to gather that information before it was compromised. That's what they'll say. But what's clear is that there at least is a program.
Hey guys, I'm excited to announce that I will be hosting a conference in my hometown of Bozeman, Montana, from the 27th through the 28th of June. NEFCON 2025 will feature captivating presentations by myself and other engaging speakers addressing an array of fascinating topics related to Nephilim, UFOs, transhumanism, alternative history, and Bible prophecy. In addition to the conference, I will be taking 50 guests on a private tour of the mysterious Sage Wall, a potential megalithic site right here in North America. The Sage Wall tour will be followed by an evening of fellowship in the mountains with feasting, bonfires, and breathtaking views. Bozeman, Montana is an outdoor adventurer's paradise that offers a wealth of exhilarating activities, including some of the best hiking, camping, whitewater rafting, and trout fishing in America. Located just 89 miles from Yellowstone National Park and 250 miles from Glacier National Park, Bozeman is the perfect place to embark on a family vacation. Tickets to the conference will become available for purchase on Thanksgiving Day in my members' community. So if you would like to get tickets to this event, go to the alberinoanalysis.com or click on the link in the description of this video and become a member today. Come join me for a conference experience like no other. NEFCON 2025, what began on Hermon, ends at Armageddon. There are many people out there on the internet who claim that all these UFOs are the product of human engineering, in other words, advanced secret technology developed by American aerospace companies. What do you guys think of this? Do you think that the United States is in possession of technology as advanced as the famous Tic Tac UFO, for example, or is this still far beyond our capabilities?
I have a hard time with that because they're putting these craft in close proximity to our American aircraft, $50+ million pieces of machinery. And worse than that, American lives are at stake. I talked to one guy and said he held up his hand and said this thing was 14 feet from my canopy, Tim. And, we had testimony of in this last hearing, a former admiral said that the craft, they were out there flying and they had no idea that they were out there, what was going on. And they sent back to him and he said, we'd have no knowledge of this, what's going on. And he said, and it's putting our craft in danger. And there's even, in the first hearing there's one group that's even formed just sort of almost like a support group for these men and women that have seen something because they're so heavily chastised for even reporting it. So it's got a real problem with something that doesn't exist. Again, we spend millions upon millions of dollars every year, saying, and Lou Elizondo headed up a department. I mean, they said it didn't even exist. And then he actually, now the young people say he brought the receipts. Well, he brought his receipts and they were check stubs from this department that he headed up. had a budget of over $10 million went through that department that did not exist. So, yeah, that's a long answer. I apologize.
I think what Lou Elizondo said in the latest hearing was kind of very interesting, and it occurred during my dialogue. And I'll tell you, Tim, when you've got 5 minutes to ask questions, it feels like you're in a rodeo. You feel like they just opened up the gate and you're on the bull and you're just there for the ride. And until you've been in that situation, it's hard to explain to others what it's like. But one of the things that Lou said that I completely passed over, he said, whenever I asked him about the recovered materials and the biological materials that are recovered, he said that this is older than he's been alive. So
that's right.
I wish I had pulled that thread, because to me, that's a fascinating topic. Because the question, our follow-up what I would have asked is, okay, you say it's older than you've been alive. How much older? Thousands of years, hundreds of years, decades older? What are we talking about here? Because if it's true that then what we may be understanding is that there was a truly ancient alien encounter that there was remnants of some ancient race or that was on this planet at some point in the past, and that there are still remnants that we can discover through archaeological finds today, if that's the case. I wanted to pull that thread, but to your question about do we have the advanced technology, even if we're not actually pulling information from alien crash vehicles and be able to reverse engineer it, I can't help but think that we have to have advanced technology that we're not hearing about.
Certainly,
because, and I would be really terrified to find out that we don't. Mm-hmm. That if we're still using conventional propulsion, if we've not moved past that form of technology, in an era in which we have discovered the Higgs boson particle, right? We have quantum computers. Quantum computers are almost so advanced, it seems magical, right? You've got quantum entanglement that is being used. Quantum computers are being used in a commercial setting. And then, of course, we have AI. So there's been an advancement in a ton of scientific discoveries. And the idea that we are not incorporating some of that knowledge that's not even public, but probably things that have not been made public, that's what I would be shocked at is to find out that we haven't made any advancements.
Yeah, I agree. And I think combining both of your answers together, it seems to me that we do have secret advanced technology. Again, I hope we do. That hasn't been disclosed to the public for defense purposes. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense, as Tim was saying, that you have these anomalous craft that are buzzing our conventional craft. I mean, what would be the purpose of that? If you have both of these technologies that have been developed by the United States government in conjunction with the aerospace companies, why would they be buzzing our craft? Why would they be making menacing maneuvers around our battleships, for example? Or, in the case that happened over here by Great Falls in Montana, where I am, why would you have these craft disarming our nuclear warheads if it's all ours? And now that raises the question, does China or does Russia have some of this kind of technology? But personally, I doubt that they... Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to address that. That's a great question that gets asked a lot. And if we had it, we would control everything. I mean, if China had it, they wouldn't be suffering economically. If Russia had it, they wouldn't be bogged down in Ukraine. I just don't think anybody here has it. And also, and going back on what Eric said, that this stuff is so advanced. It's like I'm a motorcycle guy, so I took one of these new Indian chiefs motorcycles back to the guys at the Mayflower. They would probably they could shine it up. I doubt they could adjust the fuel injectors. They couldn't even produce fuel for it. They might get it started, but that'd be about it. So I think that's what, if we have some of this advanced technology, and Bob Lazar, who's, UFO mythology almost now. He was claimed he was at Area 51. They said he wasn't. Who knows? But he made a statement one time that the original finds were archaeological finds, and so that would that would fit into what you all were saying earlier. Sorry, I'm rambling a lot. I've had two.
Oh no, that's
no, it's good. Tim,
Ramble all you want.
I'll give you one reason why. I'm just going to give a plausible explanation. Not that I agree with this, but if military is testing technology that, for example, can shut down nuclear missiles, you're not going to put that into production immediately in Russia.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You're going to
test it here locally, and you're not going to tell the local people what that technology, because for the risk of having that leak.
Panic.
Yeah. And so if you're if you're going to test an advanced propulsion device or drone, you're going to see, is it going to be picked up on radar? Is it going to be visible? What better place to do it than first test it over a U.S. military air base and see, if the best fighter pilots in the world can't encounter this or pick up this on radar, then Russia certainly isn't, and China certainly isn't. So I think that's a plausible explanation. But it doesn't ignore the fact that they're doing this, putting our own pilots and potentially others at risk.
It's a salient point. What do you make of the DoD's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, otherwise known as ARROW? Do you guys think this organization is investigating the phenomenon in good faith? Or are we looking at a counteroffensive intended to discredit your efforts?
Tim, I'll start. My perception is that these guys gave up very quickly. I think that they investigated things, and I believe that 99.9% of the events that are reported are not real.
Sure.
They can be explained, and I think that they suffered from that kind of mounting evidence and came to the conclusion that they couldn't find anything, therefore that there wasn't anything. And I think that the latter is the mistake. And so to me, if it does exist, it's going to be extremely rare. And I think that they had a defeatist attitude whenever we spoke to them.
I'll agree with that. And I think they went in with a predisposed position that they don't exist. And they were just trying to prove that point, most of them. I also believe the first thing that happened, the first meeting was a open meeting of the Intelligence Committee. And I remember the two guys they had in there, they're probably patriotic Americans, but honestly, they couldn't spell UFO. They had no clue. I mean, they bring these folks in, they asked them about the nuclear facility shutting down and the UFOs that were sighted over. They had no knowledge of that. And basically, and I stated to the press, we got hosed because we did. I just think we were set up to fail. And I think ARROW is similar.
We know that President Trump has promised to release the Kennedy files. Are there any indications that he's going to get involved in UFO disclosure? Have either of you heard from anyone in his administration in regard to this?
Well, I've been vocal about it. Yeah, he has talked. Excuse me. Sinus infection. That's what happens when you live in East Tennessee. Yeah, he has sent signals to us, but I think what you better watch out for is things like in the Senate. Senator Schumer had a 60-page bill on disclosure, and I had a 2-page bill on disclosure.
Right.
My bill wouldn't even get a hearing. His bill was the greatest thing in the world, but it copied the Kennedy files, basically. You know, how they would release them just like they did with the Kennedy stuff. Here we are 60 plus years later, and we're still wondering what the heck happened off that grassy knoll in Texas. So I think we need to be real careful with that. But I have a lot of faith in President Trump, and I think the team he's got around him is tired of the nonsense. They're tired of the arrogance, and I think we're going to see some disclosure.
Yeah, I would agree. I think his nominees for these cabinet positions, Marco Rubio and others, I think all, I mean, I'm sad that Matt Gaetz was not going to be the attorney general. He would have been an advocate for us in that regard. But I think that Trump has nominated a number of people that are of the opinion that this government belongs to the people and not the other way around. And because it belongs to the people, that the people deserve to know.
Congressman Burchett, I know you have to take off here in a minute, but can you comment on the recently introduced Whistleblower Protection Act that is designed to provide protections to whistleblowers who bring attention to federal funding that you've submitted? Where are we in that process, and what kinds of protections would that legislation, if it gets passed, provide for whistleblowers?
Well, currently, we have sort of whistleblower protection. I'm not a big fan of the laws that are in place because it just seems it's just too broad and it doesn't affect enough people. It's just very thin. And this would just, if someone were to expose to Congress that we are spending money on UFO related, UAP related stuff, and they would be provided protection from prosecution if they would bring that forward, because they tell us they don't exist. They tell us we're not spending money on it. But yet, time and time again, Lou Elizondo, all these other people say, in fact, we got a crash retrieval. Something's got to be paying for that. So it just provides those folks with some whistleblower protection. And I'm hoping that would help with the situation. It's actually moving through committee, and I hope we can get it in by the end of the year, but I doubt it. I mean, they try to kill that stuff. It's glaciers are speeding past us in Congress. It's pathetic. And you have staff, you talk about the swamp. I call it a sewer. The sewer is really the staff. I mean, they dictate which bills come forward and who schmoozes them the most. And I do a poor job of raising money and kissing butt. And that seems to be what works. But hopefully we'll get something with this.
Would that, does your legislation provide for protection of their pensions? Does it provide, protection of their lives and the lives of their families and all of that?
Yeah, their livelihoods. Absolutely. Absolutely. But there again, I think we need to strengthen some of those rules and laws that are in place, because like Grush, he came forward and then he was more or less outed by some bogus little weekly newspaper article that was obviously a plant, and they've been waiting on him, 1 week after he gets hit with this thing that happened years prior, and to discredit him. And it failed, but that just shows you what we're up against, because the deep state is real and they don't want this stuff out, because it's about power, it's about corruption, it's about money, it's all those things that run Washington, in my opinion. Control. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join me for this discussion. Tim, I know you have to run. Yeah. Can I
say one thing real quick?
Yes, please.
Eric Burlison was very nice to me about saying that, but the reality is his intellect is obvious in this topic and others, and he's a straight arrow, and we are very lucky to have him in this fight, because he brings a different level of intelligence to this committee and to the questions being asked. It's imperative that he's with us on this thing, because he gets to the meat of the issue a lot better than I do or anybody else that I've seen. So I couldn't be more happier with him and his involvement in this committee, because he does bring a different level of expertise that I lack.
Wow.
Well, I want to commend.
Later, Tim. Thank you. I love you, brother.
Yeah, I love you too, man.
I want to commend both of you for your bravery and tenacity in picking this fight with the Pentagon. I mean, it really takes guts. So well done, gentlemen. And you have, I know my audience is supporting you guys. So thank you for the effort thus far.
Thank you, brother.
And I think, Eric, we can go for a few more minutes, correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. See you
All
guys.
Right, Tim. Thanks
Follow
for joining
me on Twitter.
Yeah, Timmy.
See you. Bye. See you, brother. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay. Eric, I want to ask you. You and I have talked about this in the past, and I think you have some very interesting ideas in regard to the nature of this phenomenon. After hearing from all the witnesses so far, both publicly and assumedly privately, and having examined all the evidence, what are your personal theories about the phenomenon? Specifically, if indeed these are non-human entities we're dealing with, what are they and where do they come from? Do you have any theories?
If they indeed are non-human, then I truly am gonna try to be scientific in my thinking about this and try to be open to the possibilities. So I think that if it is indeed a non-human that is created and navigating these objects that we're seeing, then I think that there's a few plausible explanations. One is that they're traveling here real time from a nearby planet or even within our own solar system that we haven't encountered. That's one possibility. I think I believe that's probably the least likely. Two, I think that it could be very ancient, and that what we are experiencing is that we've had ancient, at some point in the past, and when you take, the reason why I say this, Tim, is that if you take a window of time and you expand it to thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, the likelihood of something having visited here is improved, right? And so that, to me, is more plausible, that you have something that maybe didn't visit here real time, but we have uncovered that material through archaeological find and then reverse engineer that. And then the other is, I'm gonna get a little bit more ethereal, if you will, is that there is no such thing as really space-time, that we're talking about a species or a race that can traverse space-time with in such a way that they're not truly traveling here. And that would be a completely advanced race, almost to the akin of what I would call spiritual, like angels, or a phenomenon that we once described as angels, or some people would still describe as angels. And then the other possibility is that this is a future race of us that has developed advanced technology to time travel. And if you think about it, if future generations can try to travel back and then observe or just watch or sightsee a previous human race or human civilizations, that's another explanation that I'm willing to explore. But what I'm not going to do is close the door and jump to one of these conclusions.
Right.
And and all of that being said, this is, if you're telling me that this is truly from a non-human origin. Now, it could be that, and I'm going to leave the door open, that this is us, that this truly is the advancement of our military industrial complex, that they have continued to advance in research and science and propulsion and other things, and that they are just keeping it a lot more secretive than they did the Manhattan Project.
We've also discussed the possibility of a crypto-terrestrial faction inhabiting the Earth.
Yeah.
You could be looking at some sort of a non-human faction that has been developing alongside of us, but in a very covert manner, perhaps inhabiting regions underground, under the sea. A lot of these UFO sightings happen at sea, and they go into the water. And one thing that I think is apparent that we can say definitively about this phenomenon is the fact that whoever these beings are, whether it's us or extraterrestrial faction or crypto-terrestrial faction or time travelers, what have you, they are in possession of technology that far exceeds anything we have in conventional science. I mean, they're dealing with a set of physics that are still, I would say, still unknown at the university level in the United States. For example, many of these craft can accelerate out of the ocean, out of the water, and then back into the water without creating a splash, which is really remarkable. And what I think that speaks to is that they're manipulating, as you said, they're manipulating space-time in a way that is inconceivable to us right now, or at least it's conceivable, but it's as far as we know, not achievable yet. And that seems to indicate that they're doing exactly what Tim mentioned, Bob Lazar. They're doing exactly what Bob Lazar said. Bob Lazar said that, and for those who don't know, Bob Lazar was a whistleblower, one of the first whistleblowers who came forward, not an official hearing or anything. There weren't such things back then in the early 90s, but he came forth in the early 90s, and he said that he had worked at the S4 facility, which is located at Groom Lake, and it's actually right by the Papoose Dry Lake area in Nevada. And Lazar ostensibly was hired to work on specifically what he called the sports model, which was a saucer that was in functioning condition, and it was a relatively small saucer. And I think it's important to note that this saucer, the interior of this saucer, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Eric, but the interior of this saucer was designed for very diminutive people. And in fact, Lazar says that at the facility, at the S4 facility, they referred to the pilots, the occupants of the saucer, as the kids, which seems to be implicating a very particular faction of entities known as the Greys, because they're small, they're 3.5 to 4 foot tall, and that the craft didn't have any kind of instrumentation inside. It didn't have like what we would have inside of our conventional craft. It didn't have buttons and switches and joysticks, anything like that. It didn't have any interfaces, any computer screens. It seemed to be molded from one particular material, and without any rivets or anything like that, or any seams, and that this craft operated the energy system of the craft was a matter-antimatter reactor, and that matter-antimatter reactor relied on a piece of exotic material called element 115. And this exotic material, there are no stable isotopes of element 115 on planet Earth. We have discovered, subsequent to Lazar's testimony, we've actually discovered that element 115, what we call moscavium today, is real. We can actually produce it in a lab. They did in Russia, but we don't have any stable isotopes. It's got a very short half-life, so we can't do anything with it. And Lazar was talking about this back in the early 90s. And this element 115 allows for a matter-antimatter reaction to take place within the reactor, which Lazar allegedly worked on. And if you know anything about matter-antimatter reactions, it's the most explosive force, one of the most explosive forces that we are aware of in physics. In fact, a matter-antimatter bomb is many, many times more powerful than any nuclear warhead that we have. Mm-hmm. And so, according to Lazar, that matter-antimatter reaction creates it creates an enormous amount of energy that is harnessed to produce gravity waves, to amplify gravity waves, what he calls gravity wave A, which is the small gravity wave that holds together the electrons, the nucleus of the atom. And we can amplify that gravity wave, according to Lazar, using this energy, and then we can use these gravity waves to manipulate space-time, or they do, the builders of these craft, use the gravity waves to manipulate space-time, create kind of a gravity bubble around the craft so that space-time moves around the craft rather than the craft moving through, the substance of space-time, the fabric of space. The space-time is moving around the craft, and that seems to me to be consistent with these craft being able to come out of the water and go into the water without making a splash, because they're moving the matter around the craft rather than moving the craft through the medium of the water or the air. I think you've talked about before, and you famously, in the first hearing, you asked David Grush a question about interdimensionality. That's a possibility too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the explanations that I gave earlier, is that you could very well have a race that has discovered a way to basically travel here without actually traveling. And I think that is possible. At that point, they would be far more advanced than we are today. If they're able to, move throughout space-time as you've described, that's mind-blowing.
Are there what do you think is the general opinion of your colleagues at this point? Your colleagues who you interface with on the committee, what would you say is the general opinion? Do they believe the whistleblower so far? Is it kind of a 50-50 situation? Where are they at?
I haven't really kind of probed them individually to figure out where people are. It would seem that the people that are on the committee are, especially the ones that are being waived on the committee, are probably coming from the perspective that, and assuming that this is true, and I would say of the conventional explanation of these are aliens from another planet, however far away, light years or not, that they're coming here to visit. I would say that's probably the most conventional view that most people have brought forward to it. I will tell you, Tim, in the last 2 years of investigating this, I've learned a lot, and a lot of different theories, and a lot of different, trying to understand the history and all of the events that occur, all the lingo from the UFO community. And so I have learned quite a bit. And the more that I learn, the more it seems like, I think that it'll help me ask the right questions and ask better questions, but it's given me more questions.
Right.
That's the one thing it's done.
Well, I mean, the implications are almost unimaginable. I mean, what you guys are prying into here is probably the greatest secret that the government has. And I don't believe that, I think they probably are not very happy with you guys, with your efforts. They have been, for many decades, have been denying, and this is an important point. The Pentagon has been denying not just that the craft exists, not just that UFOs are real, but that they're even interested in the topic. They've denied interest in the topic for decades. We know that's a lie now. They have been studying this topic for a very long time. We know that from the testimony of Lou Elizondo, also from things that Grush has said. And so the starting point for the Pentagon in regard to this, in regard to this phenomena, has been to be less than forthright about it, and in fact just to straight out lie and say, we're not really interested in the phenomenon. It's not really something that we're looking into. We know that's not true. So that's that's the organization. That's the kind of attitude that you're dealing with right out of the gates. And people have, you and I have discussed this before, but people who have gotten close to this, to certain aspects of this phenomenon, have disappeared, have died, have been persecuted, and even prosecuted in different ways. And so this is not a topic that the Pentagon is excited to talk about. You guys, that's why I said it really takes a lot of bravery and tenacity to go after this. And you're fresh in Congress and you go right for the throat. It's incredible. It really is. It's remarkable courage.
Well, I haven't had any kind of threats directly or anything like that, but I will say one of the strangest things that occurred was the day of the hearing, the first hearing. I had a reception that night, like I have most, at least once a week, have a reception to raise money, because that's the unfortunate part about being in politics, is that you spend a great deal of your time fundraising just to stay in office. But at this reception, strangely, I had never had anyone from a particular military contractor come to any of my receptions. And usually whenever you have a lobbyist come to your reception, it's one lobbyist being sent as a token lobbyist. I had 3 from this particular military contractor come to a reception. So that if that gives you an idea, that was, to me, that was unusual. And the timing of that was very, very, very interesting.
Did you get the sense that they're trying to get you in their corner? Or do you think it was some kind of a threat?
No, and I think that the truth is that the lobbyists of these companies are not going to probably be given information. I mean, there's no way that if this is truly a secret, there's no way they're going to tell a lobbyist on Capitol Hill what the secrets are. If anything, they might be given a direction. Hey, you guys need to build a relationship with this person.
Right. They're trying to court more support from Congress.
Mm-hmm.
In the last hearing, Admiral, and I think I don't know how you pronounce his name. I'm going to say Gallaudet. Admiral Gallaudet, at least in my mind, confirmed that Arrow is in fact a DoD, what I would describe as a DoD counteroffensive operation that was created to discredit and discourage further congressional inquiry into the matter of UFOs, especially relating to crash retrievals. He made this extraordinary statement. He said, quote, "Earlier this year, I met with the DoD's all-domain anomaly resolution office, and what I thought would be a 90-minute meeting just to meet with leadership turned out to be an hours-long influence operation on me. They attempted to convince me of the validity of the very flawed and error-ridden historical records report. In addition, they tried to have me question very valid UAP reports like the Tic Tac incident, even stating possibly that the Tic Tac was American technology. And they also cast discredit on various UAP whistleblowers and witnesses to question their validity and credibility," end quote. That seems to me like a coercive operation that Arrow is running to try and convince the Admiral of a very particular viewpoint. And I'm wondering, do you feel like there's been any coercion, even subtle coercion from Arrow? I know you guys have had closed door briefings from Arrow. Do you feel like there's any coercion going on to members of Congress to try and steer them in a particular direction?
Here's what my makeup is of the guys at Arrow, if you'll indulge me, is that, of course, I think that they have if you're in that instance and you've been given that responsibility to investigate this and you have failed in finding the information that we're all looking for, rather than say we failed to find it and admit failure, you're going to participate in groupthink that there is nothing to be found, right? You're going to jump to that conclusion and assume that that's the case, rather than to admit that there's more work that needs to be done. And I think that that's probably most likely that's the sense that I've had whenever I talk with them, is that these are individuals who have not performed as what was expected, and therefore they are trying to lower the expectations. And I think I don't know that these individuals have been given the secret recipe, if you will, and are just part of the conspiracy to block the information. My guess is it's higher up, it's further higher up than them, if it's true that you've got the way that was described in the hearing is that program is called Immaculate Constellation, and that even the special access programs within that umbrella program have no idea what it is that they're working on. And so to me, you've got Arrow, which is trying to figure out what these special access programs are working on, and they're getting they're getting really nowhere. Well, the people within those programs are not getting anywhere. They're not given the information. So at least we've been given at least a breadcrumb to go after to investigate Immaculate Constellation. I thought that the Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet was probably one of the best witnesses, if not the best witness at that hearing. I was not expecting the forthrightness that he brought to that hearing, the honesty. I kind of expected him to stay in, very official, and not really disclose much, but he was a lot of the things that he said, especially after the hearing, are the things that when I process them are some of the most relevant, revealing information. So for example, when he talked about, that experience that he had with Arrow, I thought that was pretty interesting. The fact that the documents on his computer the email was immediately deleted the next day, from the UAP video that was I think it was the Go Fast video that was disseminated, and then it was deleted from his computer. So that suggests that there is an overarching, there's something overarching that has access to be able to pull those strings, to be able to get data that's removed from a Rear Admiral's and his colleagues' emails.
Have you guys heard testimony? And if you're not, well, I don't want to get you in any trouble, but so you can say no comment if you want. Have you guys been able to hear testimony behind closed doors that is even more extraordinary than what we've heard publicly? Has there been any of that going on?
No, not that I could think of.
I know that a lot of the answers especially from Lou Elizondo, from some of the direct questions you guys asked them was, I can't tell you that in an open setting. I can tell you that in a private, in a skiff. Have you been able to do that with Elizondo or anyone else?
No, and that's probably the most frustrating part of this is that, for example, David Grush is willing to open up the kimono, if you will, in a skiff, and he's not been allowed to do that. We're not able to get that. So the gatekeepers for this include the four corners. So if you're going to have someone like David Grush or Lou Elizondo come in and testify, that entire process is convoluted. It's very hard to understand unless you've been in the intelligence community and you know exactly how it works. You're going to get stiff-armed and they're not going to tell you exactly what you need to do. But for example, when it comes to David Grush, his credentials had expired. So he doesn't have the security clearance to talk about the things that he once could. And even if we were able to renew his security clearance, before we bring him into a skiff, we would have to get a sign-off from the chairman and the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, the chairman and ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. And then you'd have to get that from both the House and from the Senate. You'd also have to get permission from the Speaker, and from the Minority Leader. You'd have to get basically everyone's sign off. And if any one of those decides, nope, we're not going to have this hearing, then it doesn't happen. So that to me is a problem that we're not able to get to we're told they can tell us this information, but we have to go to a skiff, and then we go about the work, which is a painstakingly long process of getting approvals. And it all takes is one person to be a veto on that hearing happening.
So it appears then that the Pentagon was running out the clock with Grush then, right? Because they were dragging their feet. You guys were trying to get him in a skiff, and the Pentagon's dragging their feet, knowing that his security clearance was going to run out, was going to expire.
Yeah, I think that that's the case. I tried to be creative. Look, I'm a freshman, so I'm just trying to think outside the box. I thought if I hire Grush as an employee of my office, then perhaps we could keep his clearance up to date. But at the end of the day, I would only have access that the Speaker and the committee chairman would give me. So they would basically do nothing unless we got permission from them. So we back to square one.
So we can say then with a degree of confidence that the Pentagon has been obfuscating and obstructing your attempts and the attempts of your colleagues to get into the skiff with these guys.
Yeah, I think that if they wanted this information to be revealed, they would probably renew their security clearance. Now we would still have to go through the gatekeepers of the committee chair and the ranking members, but it might make it a little bit easier if they were willing to cooperate.
As a final question here, there's a lot of people out there. I encounter a lot of people out there who, especially since recent events with a certain pandemic, who have lost all faith, 100% of trust in government wholesale. And they are of the opinion that this entire thing is just a psyop, that it's a circus, it's a dog and pony show, the hearings, Congress's effort to get disclosure on the question of UFOs, that the whole thing is just a government psyop. And I've been saying for a long time that that's clearly not the case to me, because there's individuals such as yourself, such as Tim, such as Nancy Mace, and other colleagues of yours that really, truly want to get to the bottom of this and as I said earlier, are risking a lot. I mean, this is the biggest, in my estimation, this is the biggest secret that the federal government has. And whether it's aliens or whether it's our own technology, they are intentionally circumventing Congress and by extension, the American people. And we have no idea what is being developed in secret, where money's going, where money's coming from, which is obviously your concern and your colleagues' concern, because that, to me, seems illegal. And they're using these defense contracting aerospace companies to get around a lot of this oversight. And what would you say to people who think that the whole thing is just a psyop, that the government wants us? Because here's what the narrative is. The government wants us to believe in UFOs. That's the narrative. The government wants us to believe in UFOs, and this whole thing's a psyop, or the government wants us to believe in aliens. What would you say to those people?
So I asked that question to Lou Elizondo a year ago in a breakfast meeting. And I think I startled him because I said, what would you say to people who say that you are part of this effort to basically to provide to gaslight the American people, to provide disinformation, and in order to get access to more dollars? Now, I think that the individual Gold that was at the hearing from NASA, I mean, he was there to seek more revenue for NASA. That was he. I don't think that he had much information to provide to that hearing.
I concur.
But I think that, and so I asked Lou that, and his response to me was, he said, "Well, why would I violate the law and lie to members of Congress?" Now he can say that in a lunch meeting or in a breakfast meeting, but when he stood there and put his hand up and took an oath, I think that Lou takes that. I do not believe that this is an individual that would lie under oath. I feel the same way about David Grush. Now, do I think does that mean that their experiences are, and what they believe that they see or that they've heard is the absolute truth? That's a whole nother question. But I think that, especially all of the witnesses that came forward, in both hearings, I believe spoke very honestly to us, members of Congress, because I think that they understood that if they perjure themselves or if they, lie, that they are exposed to contempt of Congress. But I think that at the end of the day, I don't doubt any of the testimony from the pilots, Ryan Graves and the other pilot. I don't deny that their testimony was probably as honest as it could be.
Well, this is truly a Herculean effort that you guys are making. And again, I commend you for your dedication. As we've said a couple of times here, you're fresh into Congress and you're taking on Goliath. And I really appreciate it. I know my audience appreciates it. I know the UFO community at large appreciates it. Sometimes I feel like less than they should. I mean, I that's what bothers me about the PSYOP narrative when people say, "Oh, the whole thing's a PSYOP." Well, what they're doing is they're belittling you and Tim and Nancy and everybody else in Congress who's actually fighting for this and spending a great deal of time and energy to try and hold the government accountable. And so, thank you, Congressman Burlison. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you for joining me for this conversation today.
I really enjoy it. And thank you for everything that you do. I really appreciate the insights that you give and your help as we continue to investigate this.
Thank you, sir.